Good evening. Good to have you all with us tonight. This is the Foreign Policy Association's Financial Services Dinner. As Noel mentioned, I'm Pat Kiernan, known to New Yorkers for the last 25 years as the host of the morning show on New York One News. I am a New Yorker. I'm also a proud Canadian, so I was delighted to be invited to be part of this evening with tonight's strong connections to Canada. It's interesting that tonight's dinner was scheduled in the same night as a New York Rangers Montreal Canadiens game. I last looked, it was 1-1. If anybody wants to keep me updated, we can do that through the evening. So grateful that we are able to assemble again in person for events like this, and so grateful to see the way the city is flourishing once again. For those of you who weren't able to follow all of the FPA events in person and virtual over the past few years, what you may not be aware of, I do want to bring you up to speed. George Santos won the FPA medal 8 years in a row, according to his website. He was not able to join us tonight. The Financial Services Dinner is the Foreign Policy Association's premier event as we gather with business leaders from around the world. On behalf of Chairman Henry Fernandez, Vice Chairman Sena Sabah, and Noel Latif, who was just up here, the President and CEO of the Foreign Policy Association, welcome to all of you. We'd like to begin with a video about the work of the FPA now in its 105th year.
It began as an ideal, shared by visionaries who saw a world where American foreign policy was debated not only in think tanks and universities, but in community centers, libraries, and homes across the country.
Klamath Falls has what is called a Great Decisions Group. There are about 15,000 of them across the country.
Military action is the only action that keeps the communists contained anywhere.
Would you go to war over Vietnam and Laos?
I certainly would do anything to find one all-out war over there.
They imagined an organization that would inform us all to shape the future. An organization dedicated to gathering the best research and offering the facts of world issues without bias. Knowledge made accessible and shared to change our world for the better.
Tonight I am speaking as a guest of the Foreign Policy Association, a nationwide organization, a distinguished organization.
People keep inquiring whether I would do it all over again. My answer is yes. The problem is no one has asked me.
I would like to express my appreciation to the Foreign Policy Association for helping bring this group together today.
Today, the FPA's flagship Great Decisions program is the largest discussion program on global affairs. Each week at community centers nationwide, participants read the Great Decisions briefing book and watch the television series before discussing and debating the most critical global issues facing America. In high schools and universities across the country, graduates of FPA's Teacher Training Institute design Great Decisions courses for their students. In their homes, millions of Americans watch the Emmy-nominated Great Decisions television series on public television, delivering essential background and diverse perspectives, challenging viewers to make their own great decisions.
I am very happy to have participated in the Great Decision programs and the work of the Foreign Policy Association. There needs to be more education in terms of what is going on abroad in order to fully understand how it affects our own people.
And in New York City, the FPA continues to attract world leaders to engage its members and the public.
I think this organization can make a major contribution to fulfilling our responsibilities as a people.
I have been for many years, long before I was in the United States Senate, a great admirer of this institution and what it's done and what it does. And I think the role it will continue to play in a very complicated world.
Through its balanced, nonpartisan programs and publications, The FPA encourages Americans to discuss and debate world issues and to participate in the foreign policy process. For a century, the Foreign Policy Association has operated under the mantra that a properly functioning democracy depends on an informed citizenry, a beacon that will illuminate our next century. Thank you for your support and for your participation.
And now for tonight's opening remarks, I'll call Henry Fernandez to the microphone, Chairman of the Foreign Policy Association and Chairman and CEO of MSCI.
Despite honoring George Santos, I hope I'm the real thing here. Right? And what I can tell you is the real thing too, not made up. Good evening, everyone, and it's great to see you all here tonight. I am really honored to serve as chairman of the board of the Foreign Policy Association. I'd like to start by thanking Pat for his kind introduction of this event and his desire and willingness to serve as our MC. Thank you very much, but I watch his program. Even though I get tempted to switch channels to go to the business news channel, I do watch you every morning, especially when you get the newspaper in front of you there. Thank you. I would also like to also thank Noel Latif, our fearless CEO of the Foreign Policy Association. Please, a round of applause for. And Matt Barberi and everyone at the FPA who has been able to put this event tonight. Thank you for all that great effort. Last but not least, I would like to offer my gratitude to all of you for joining us tonight. It's such an incredible experience to be back together here in person, especially in this great hall, after a number of years that we had to endure the pandemic. I always look forward to this dinner every year, but especially this year, given the honorees and the presenters that we have tonight, is really a stellar group of leaders all over the world. As I was preparing my remarks, I was thinking about how much the world has changed in the past 12 months. When we met here in March of 2022, which feels like an eternity now, Russia had just launched the unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine. Many experts around the world believe that Kiev will fall within days or weeks. But the Ukrainians had other plans. Their courage, their resolve have inspired us all across the world while strengthening the Western democracies and the NATO alliance. NATO is more unified today than at any point since 1989. Even Sweden and Finland are now on the verge of joining the alliance. These two countries, as you know well, resisted joining NATO during the Cold War. And for more than 3 decades after the end of the Cold War, they resisted to join. So this is just one way in which Putin's war and Ukraine's resilience have transformed the global landscape. Another example of that tremendous change that we see in the world in the last 12 months is clearly China. Beijing's response to the war has hardened the attitudes in Washington. Even as Western countries have placed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, China continues to promote the no limits partnership with Moscow. As a person who has been visiting China since 1979, I was a baby at the time, and continue to visit and be friends with many government officials and with many business leaders, it baffles me what the benefits are of China continuing to strengthen their alliance and partnership with Russia. Both Democrats and Republicans in Congress agree on very, very little these days. But they do increasingly agree that China poses a historic threat to not only U.S. interest, but democratic principles and the West, around the West in Europe. Looking ahead, I fear that the U.S.-China relationship will get worse before it gets better, especially if they make that incredible decision of supporting Russia with weapons. And it tears me to say that and to see what could happen to that country of China, which I have so much respect and admiration for. Well, on a more encouraging note, the growth of renewable energy has dramatically accelerated in the world. For obvious reasons, many countries around the world have spent the last year trying to become less reliant and less vulnerable to fossil fuel supply shocks. In the process, fortunately, many of them have turned to renewable energies and less carbon intensity sources of energy. As my colleagues at MSCI in their research have observed, Russia's invasion gave a short-term boost to fossil fuels, yet it also spurred a clean energy arms race. In that sense, our current energy challenges could actually help speed up the long-term transition to a low-carbon economy. Tonight's honorees share a commitment to sustainability and to corporate responsibility that goes far beyond what most business leaders have said or done in their careers. They recognize that the finance and investment industry has a very unique role to play in helping the world reach net zero emissions. After all, this journey to net zero and to decarbonize the global economy will require the largest transformation of the global economy in human history and the largest reallocation of capital and repricing of assets that the world has ever seen. So therefore, the role of capital, i.e. the investment and finance industry, is pivotal in that process of reallocation and repricing of capital to face the challenges that we see ahead. We cannot hope to accomplish all of that without robust support from financial and investment firms. The task may seem daunting, but global leaders, like the ones we are honoring here tonight, when they find a unifying mission and a sense of purpose, they can achieve what is previously thought to be unthinkable in the world. That country in Central Europe of Ukraine has reminded us of that. How a group of individuals in which a foreign country, very powerful foreign country, wants to take their land, their sovereignty, their families, and they're fighting tooth and nail, and they have galvanized and unified the world to help them in that endeavor. Margaret Thatcher famously said at one point, "There are no permanent victories in politics." I would like to add that there are no permanent victories in geopolitics either. The expansion of the global democracy is not inevitable. It's not granted by a message from God. Nor is the global embrace of sustainability and the transition to a low-carbon economy. Both require constant vigilance, continuous effort, rigorous debates, the presentation of different ideas, and deep cooperation. And this is where the Foreign Policy Association comes in and plays a vital role as a forum in which we hear divergent points of view from all over the world, from different walks of life, from very different political orientations, in a spirit of learning and in a spirit of finding solutions to the world's problem. As you saw in the video, since 1918, this organization has hosted leaders from every continent and has embarked on that rigorous debate of the issues, trying to find the solutions to those challenges that we face. It has therefore provided a forum where all voices can be heard and all points of view can be understood. At a moment of intense polarization, we and the FPA promote that dialogue, that collaboration on the most pressing issues. This mission has never been more important than it is today. So on behalf of everyone at the FPA, thank you so much again for coming out to support us tonight and help us honor these giants of the world. Please allow me or join me in congratulating them for honoring them and for their contribution to our society.
To begin the evening, it's my pleasure to have Henry Fernandez come up to present the FPA's Corporate Social Responsibility Award. The recipient tonight, Lorenzo Bini Smaghi, chairman of Societe Generale. And before we present the award and hear from the honoree, we'd like to show a video message from former United States Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin.
On behalf of the Foreign Policy Association, I am pleased and honored to present this year's award on corporate social responsibility to Lorenzo Bini Smaghi. Throughout his career, Lorenzo has worked to advance economic security, financial prosperity, energy security, and much else in Italy, Europe, and beyond. In 1998, Lorenzo worked in the finance ministry in Italy, and he was the Sherpa to the G7 and G20 summits, where he worked on the complex issues then facing the world with the Treasury Department, of which I was then secretary, and the people in our department that were engaged in these issues and who found Lorenzo an extremely instructive and insightful participant in those discussions. Lorenzo has held key central bank roles in Europe and in Italy, culminating in his service as a member of the executive board of the ECB during a complex and difficult time. Lorenzo's private sector business experience extends from critical natural gas and energy infrastructure firms in Italy, and now serves as the chairman of Societe Generale, one of Europe's largest financial institutions. And he is widely respected throughout the financial world for his leadership on corporate social responsibility and for his recognition of the complexities of that issue, and for dealing thoughtfully with those complexities. Although many have benefited from Lorenzo's views through his writing, I have served with Lorenzo on the board, an advisory board, of a major financial institution in Europe for some years now, and he is a constructive, thoughtful, and insightful participant in those discussions. Lorenzo, in brief, is a corporate leader, a policymaker, a scholar, and a strong public voice on the issues facing business and society. He stands in the best tradition of those who have received the FPA's Corporate Social Responsibility Award in years past. Lorenzo, congratulations, and thank you for having me with you.
And I'll invite Henry back to the stage to present tonight's award.
It's a real honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor for me to be here. Thank you for honoring Societe Generale and myself as chairman of the board with the Corporate Social Responsibility Award. It's my pleasure and great honor to be here this evening among such distinguished leaders. I would also like to pay tribute to the Foreign Policy Association, its chairman, its CEO, for all the actions you've been doing and we have been seeing in the video early on. Societe Generale has been integrating best CSR policies for decades now, joining early United Nations initiatives on positive impact finance, embracing the principles for responsible banking, and more recently working with peers on the Net Zero Banking Alliance towards the decarbonization of the economy. We got this prize 10 years ago at Societe Generale, so we are back, showing that we are consistent through the years. Now, I thought instead of boring you with all the nice things we do at Societe Generale, maybe I'll share with you 2 or 3 thoughts about the issue of climate change in particular that has become one of the key dominant issues at the global level, and it's become an issue of foreign policy. Just 2 or 3 points I would like to share with you. The difficulty to address these issues in a polarized world. Polarized world and polarized societies. In all of our countries, US, Europe, within Europe, there are so many issues on which there's very little agreement, and views tend to be very divergent. And this, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we have to face and that we have to work to reduce these challenges. Let me mention 2 or 3. One issue, which is big also in Italy or in Europe or in the US, is the speed at which our societies need to change. And there are strong views that we are moving too fast, that this is going to create major problems for industry, for workers, for the organizations, and other people, generally younger people, think that we are moving too slow. And finding the right pace is quite complicated for policymakers, so we tend to set deadlines, often without thinking what are the implications. And very often we hear views that we are not prepared for 2030, 2035, 2050. And it's clearly a big challenge for all of us that have responsibilities. The issue that I don't personally I don't hear often is what's the alternative? That is, if we don't move very fast, we will not be able to reach the objectives. We'll have much higher temperatures. We'll have more pollution, and in the end, we will have to invest much more, so it will be more costly. And that kind of a debate, I feel, is very much missing. That is, that it's true that it's going to be very costly to achieve the targets, but if we miss them, the developments that we will have will lead us to have to invest much more and to have much higher costs. The second issue for discussion, and that's we hear debates, is that why are we moving so fast if the others are not moving? In particular, emerging markets, poor people, the poor nations. Europe only contributes 6% to the total carbon emissions. Why should we be the more ambitious? And of course, the others, the advanced economies, saying, I mean, you have polluted for centuries. Now we have to grow before we move to ambitious climate agendas. And of course, the discussion is very difficult, and we've seen this in Paris, in Sharm el-Sheikh, and in the next meeting this year. It's very difficult to find the right balance, but I think coming ourselves from the advanced world, we sometimes forget that this is a great opportunity to be the leaders, to have the right technologies, to be ahead. Because if we wait for emerging markets, if we wait for China, in fact, China is overcoming us on many of the technologies that are needed for the transition. So these arguments that we pollute less, so we should do less, in my view, we should reflect a lot about this, whether this is really true or whether we should not try to be even better. Let me turn to the third point, which is linked to our role as financial institutions. What is the role of financial institutions in all this? And here also, there's a lot of polarization. If you talk in Europe with regulators, they would say, well, financial institutions should lead by example. They should be ahead of the curve. They should introduce the technology, help their clients, introduce very ambitious targets in their own portfolios. In other parts of the world, as we see even in this country, there are different views that, financial institutions should not be involved at all. They should be neutral and not lead the process. But of course, the reality is probably in between. Financial institutions have a very important role because they not only invest, but they help clients work to the transition and equip themselves for the transition. But financial institutions cannot lead if the followers are too far behind. And that's the big challenge, I think, for us, is to involve the rest of the system, companies, households, policymakers, to help them work together. And we are willing to lead, of course, but it's important that those who follow are close to us, not too far away. Otherwise, we risk going in the wrong direction. So, as a financial institution, I would say we are proud to be part of the leadership, but it's very important that we keep the pack very close, and that is our mission, the way we see it. Not only working day to day with our clients, with our stakeholders, with the policymakers, but also with the public opinion. Financial institutions are not always the most popular among the public opinion, as you well know. But I think the recent financial crisis has shown that banks and financial institutions can be part of the solution, not necessarily always part of the problem. And the changes that have happened since the financial institution, I think, have strengthened, since the financial crisis, have strengthened the financial system and made it possible to be a leader in this key challenge for the next couple of decades at least, that is to make this world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for those remarks. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome the former permanent representative of Canada to the UN, Executive Vice President at Caisse de dépôt, the Honorable Marc-André Blanchard will introduce our next honoree, who is the Honorable Jean Chrétien. What, Mr. Charest, I'm sorry, that's years of years of Canadian television reporting. The former Premier of Quebec is the man with us tonight, partner at McCarthy at Tétrault, to receive the FPA medal.
It's not the first time that it happens. I've heard that before. So, listen, Excellencies, and special salute to our friend, the new Consul General of Canada in the city of New York, Tom Clark, and to Martine Hébert, the Délégué Général du Québec ici à New York, and Henry and Noel. It feels like a family reunion for me to come back to New York in this world, and I'm so happy to be here and to have this privilege of presenting our honoree tonight. I also want to say that as a leader of la Caisse des dépôts et placements du Québec, CDPQ, I just want to offer my congratulations to two great friends of our institutions, actually, Generali and Societe Generale, to Phillipe and Lorenzo. These are two institutions that are very like-minded, la Caisse des dépôts et placements du Québec, and we're three great partners. We do many things together. I just want to congratulate you from the bottom of our hearts at the CDPQ. I have the privilege of calling Jean Charest a personal friend for more than 25 years. Like millions of Canadians, I've been following his career dedicated to public service for close now to 40 years. He started very, very young. In Canada, we know that Jean Charest contributed a lot to the so-called dynamism of the Canadian Federation. In Quebec, we also know that as Premier from 2003 to 2012, he focused on strengthening our economy, ensuring our sustainability. And in particular, he worked very hard to ensure Quebec's strategic positioning in the world. I'm particularly proud for Premier Charest, but also for Quebec, that tonight we're recognizing his contribution as a leader most engaged in the world. When he was a young environment minister in the cabinet of Prime Minister Mulroney at the time, he played a key role in Canada's leadership in the Earth Summit in Rio. When he was premier, there was a broad consensus amongst Quebecers on the effectiveness of his engagement with key partners around the world. Premier Charest was an ambitious premier for Quebec's engagement and assertiveness on the world stage. His very first trip as premier outside of the province was here in New York City, here at the Foreign Policy Association in the spring of 2003. It was then important for Premier Charest to come to New York City to engage with the financial community and show to the world that our U.S. relationship was a priority of his government and that Quebec was open for business. He developed a close working relationship with governors of the Northeast of the United States. from the Midwest as well, from the West. He was able to launch a very innovative agreement with the state of California on a carbon trading platform. On transatlantic relationships, he developed deep working relationships with the government of France, UK, Germany, the European Union generally, and the Francophonie. Canada now has a free trade agreement with the European Union. Well, this was Jean Charest's idea. He's the one who first planted the seeds successfully with European leaders. Quebec and France agreed on the recognition of professional qualifications to allow our people to work more easily in France and in Quebec. This is something we have not even achieved yet internally in Canada. Just imagine the leadership and the ambition it took to make it happen between France and Quebec. These are only a few of the highlights of his accomplishments as a Canadian and Quebec leader on the world stage. Well, for Jean Charest, getting things done on the world stage, everything starts with building trust and relationships. Jean Charest deeply believes in personal relationships, in strategic alliances, in friendship. He deeply believes in diplomacy. He deeply believes in the work of organizations like the Foreign Policy Association. This is why it's so fitting and meaningful that tonight the Foreign Policy Association presents its Foreign Policy Association Medal to the Honorable Jean Charest. So, Mr. Charest, congratulations. No, you need to wear the medal.
I need to wear it.
First. Congratulations.
Thank you. Merci. There we go. Thank you very, very much, Marc-André. And Mr. Chairman Fernandez, thank you very much for this honor that's bestowed upon me by the FPA. Marc-André mentioned just a moment ago that after being sworn in 20 years ago, this was the first outing as Premier of Quebec was with the FPA. And I remember it very, very fondly. I also want to acknowledge Noel Latif, who's been a very good friend, not only of myself, but also, I should say, the government of Quebec, and an ambassador for the FTA and for your own country. Marc-André also acknowledged Martine Hébert. We've had a delegation here in the state of New York for over 80 years now. And the Premier who opened the delegation did it because it was the first one he ever opened, because we wanted to have access to the bond markets at the time. And he was also a fan of the New York Yankees. Thought this would be a good pretext to be in New York. And I also want to welcome to New York Tom Clark, who's our new Consul General, and his wife Jenny, who's with us tonight, and a very well-known Canadian in the media, much like our MC tonight, Peter Kiernan. And Peter, don't feel bad about the great compliment you made to Jean Chrétien tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I was elected 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the backdrop of world events was 9/11 and the war in Iraq. It was a difficult year in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. But whatever our disagreements were at the time, they were resolved. What followed was an exceptional period of cooperation between both countries on border issues and national security in particular. What followed was an exceptional period also in our friendship. Up until then, up until the events of 9/11, the number one issue between Canada and the United States was trade. But the late ambassador of the United States in Canada, Paul Cellucci at the time, reset the terms of the relationship by stating very simply that from now on, security, trumps trade. And that has been the case ever since. I'm very proud to be a Quebecer and a Canadian. Je suis très, très fier d'être un Québécois et d'un Canadien. Et d'ailleurs, ça m'impressionne ce soir de partager la même scène que deux éminents personnages du monde des finances, M. Bini, Smaghi, que vous venez tout juste d'entendre. Il faut apprécier le fait, you have to appreciate the fact that it is an Italian who chairs the board of Societe Generale. And in a few minutes from now, you'll be honoring Phillipe Donnet, who's the CEO of Generali, a Frenchman. And so I also want to congratulate them et vous dire à quel point je suis honoré de me trouver sur la même scène que vous ce soir. Ladies and gentlemen, in the lottery of world citizenship, to be a Canadian is to win the first prize. Please. The second prize, which isn't bad, is to be an American. And then it's either French or Italians come in ex aequo. But we cannot overstate our great fortune to have been born in North America and to have each other as neighbors. We are partners, allies, and friends. And we live in the best neighborhood in the world. There are many celebrated quotes of American presidents and Canadian prime ministers on our relationship. And one of my favorites is one from the leader of a third party named Robert Thompson, who in the 1960s in the House of Commons said this: "The Americans are our best friends, whether we like it or not." Another good friend of mine, Derek Burney, who served as Canada's ambassador for the United States, gave it another twist by saying, "Canadians are Americans' best friends, whether they actually know it or not." Canada, and I want to talk a bit about our country, Canada is a country of diversity and among the most decentralized federations in the world. If you want to understand Canada, that's extremely important. In fact, the only other country I know more decentralized than Canada is Belgium, and no one knows how Belgium works. We are a country founded by indigenous people, the French and the English. We have a small population base of only 40 million people, and we have French and English as our two official languages. For every Canadian Prime Minister is faced with two basic challenges. The number one task is to keep our country united. And this is not a theoretical issue for Canada. In the last 40 years alone, in my home province of Quebec, we experienced 2 referendums on the issue of separation. The last one in 1995, in which I was involved, came within 0.5% of a vote that could have caused the breakup of the country. The participation rate in that referendum campaign, ladies and gentlemen, was 94% of people who signed up for the campaign. 94%. It gives you an idea of the intensity of the choice that we were making. The powerful issues of identity that drive nationalist sentiments are not exclusive to Canada. Think of Scotland, Catalonia, maybe even Texas. The second most important challenge facing every prime minister is maintaining and managing our relationship with the United States. We are 2 sovereign countries that essentially share the same values, but with a different history, reflecting similar but often different outlooks on the world. We've always been among each other's most important trading partners. We entered 2 successful trade agreements, one in 1988 that was validated in a federal election campaign of which I was part of, and the other one, NAFTA, which was hardly fought in Congress in 1994 and has now become CUSMA. Our economies are deeply, deeply integrated. We share a common environment, and we've talked a lot about that already tonight, with century-old institutions like the International Joint Commission that manages our joint water resources. We are signatories of the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer, the Acid Rain Agreement, the Climate Change Convention, and several other international, national, regional agreements. There's hundreds of them between both our countries. In the area of security, our cooperation is unparalleled. We are among the members of the Five Eyes intelligence community. Through NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, we've been working together since 1958. On energy, Canada remains your most reliable partner for every available source of energy. Hydroelectricity from Quebec actually lights up Broadway. We also have oil, gas, uranium, and now we're working very closely on renewables. In this exceptional relationship with the U.S., for Canada, one hard reality stands out. America is not only a neighbor, a friend, America is also a superpower. This presents a particular set of challenges for Canada in managing our bilateral issues. Our relationship is so good, peaceful, and friendly that we often find ourselves as collateral damage of American policy, like Buy America provisions. And while we're not usually the target, it does affect us directly. American legislators forget that we don't so much trade as we actually make things together. Take cars, for example. Before they're assembled in one country or the other, our integrated supply chains mean that they cross the border about 7 times on average because we make the cars together. 25% of what the USA imports from Canada all consist of value added from the United States itself. That is the type of trade that we have and experience in North America. And it is directly the contrary of what Buy America provisions should be, when in fact we're actually building, literally building, things together. To understand all of this from the Canadian perspective, it's important to understand that superpowers, like the United States, behave like superpowers. When faced with an obstacle, the U.S. can be single-minded. For example, Canada has learned from experience that on matters of trade, if you enter into a trade agreement with the Americans, administrations reserve themselves the right to interpret the rules. It's what we call power, and the use of power to defend what it understands to be in its interest. This can be a complicated and uncomfortable situation for the smaller partner in the relationship. However, over the years, respective Canadian governments, provincial premiers, business leaders have learned how to work the American political system to deliver successful outcomes for both sides. I want to share a few thoughts about the context of our relationship today. During my public life, I witnessed, either from the House of Commons or the National Assembly in Quebec, the fall of the Soviet Union and the building of the European Union. I saw the emergence of Indo-Pacific and China as it opened up in 1978, as our chairman mentioned earlier, became a member of the WTO, and has since also emerged as a superpower. I led Canada's delegation to the Earth Summit in Rio in '92, which gave birth to the Climate Change Convention and the Convention on Biodiversity. I'm proud to have negotiated this agreement that we have with the state of California for the first carbon trading system, one of the first in the world. We've witnessed the emergence of climate, biodiversity, sustainability issues, including ESG, among the most compelling and urgent issues of our lifetime. In 2008-09, we had and experienced the most severe financial and economic crisis since the Great Depression, and we now have just been through a world pandemic. And today, we're witnessing the brutal aggression of Ukraine by Russia. Security and conflict now dominate the agenda of world leaders. Threats of cybersecurity, biological and chemical warfare, nuclear proliferation, conflict not only in outer space, but now actually in near space, is what is part of our lives. Potential conflicts in the South China Sea, Taiwan, the Middle East, Iran, North Korea, threaten our democracies and our freedoms. The great American academic Graham Allison of Harvard speaks of the Thucydides trap and the possible collision of a rising superpower and an incumbent superpower. For Canada and the Western world, including Europe, and I would add Germany in particular, there are hard lessons to be learned. Peace and security should never, ever be taken for granted. In Canada, we have not assumed our share of defense expenditures to defend our country. We and the rest of the world are now scrambling to catch up and revitalize vital supply chains of military equipment. We need American leadership, but we must recognize that Americans can't carry the burden alone, and that allies must step up and pay their fair share of the cost for our collective security. We're only now measuring the impact of loss of control over sensitive key technological research and hardware, on semiconductors, research on AI, 5G, access to strategic and critical minerals, of which Canada has plenty. Our over-reliance on supply chains controlled by other countries puts our national security and sovereignty at risk. I want to turn my attention now, in this context, to an urgent matter that should become a joint project for both countries. Canada and the U.S. share a particular interest in protecting our sovereignty in the Arctic. This part of our planet is being transformed by climate change before our very eyes. The geopolitical consequences are immediate and they're dramatic. The melting of the Arctic ice is opening up 2 new trade routes. The Northern Passage, controlled and now militarized by the Russians after they had said they would not militarize the Northern route, by the way, is now opening up. And the other one is the Northwest Passage, which belongs to Canada, but that neither the US or Europe recognize as Canadian territory. In fact, the last time an American Secretary of State spoke to this issue was in 2019, when Mike Pompeo, in a speech delivered in all places in Finland, went out of his way in the speech to reaffirm that the Northwest Passage was not Canadian. And I have to be one of the only 3 people in the world to have read this speech. The Chinese in 2017 published a paper about the Polar Silk Road, which for all intents and purposes is Canada. These pressures, including the abundance of natural resources in the Arctic, speak to an urgent need for Canada to assume its responsibilities and affirm its sovereignty over its own territory. We should be working closely and respectfully with our Indigenous people, and in particular the Inuit, to launch a major sovereignty initiative in the Canadian North and the Arctic. We need to urgently establish a strong presence with, at minimum, 2 military bases, including one with a deep-sea port with icebreakers, submarines, warships, and frigates to patrol our waters. But we cannot act alone. We need the engagement of the United States together with other institutions like NATO and NORAD. Now, the transatlantic response to the war in Ukraine has taught us that we cannot respond without the leadership of the U.S. Europe alone is unable to respond to this act of aggression. The same is true for other conflicts. We understand that domestic politics, certainly Canadians understand this, that the domestic politics in the U.S. determines the ability of America to assume its leadership elsewhere in the world. The bottom line, though, is that American leadership is indispensable. I would hope that American leaders would heed the wise advice of the distinguished Secretary of State, George Shultz, who would equate multilateralism and diplomacy with gardening. For the late Secretary Shultz, it was about the steady and diligent tending of relatively unchanging interest and the cultivation and maintenance of alliances. In this respect, Canadians are grateful to have the United States as our neighbor, our ally, and our friend, whether we like it or not, and whether you know it or not. Thank you very much.
I know when I retell my evening story to the crew at New York 1 in the morning that they will have graphics on the screen to say Peter Kiernan instead of Pat Kiernan tomorrow. So I look forward to that tomorrow. Congratulations, Mr. Charest. I'd like now to bring Henry Fernandez back to the stage to present the FPA's Corporate Social Responsibility Award. The recipient tonight, Phillipe Donnet, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Generali, the largest insurance company in Europe. First, though, we have another video message from Larry Fink, Chairman and CEO of BlackRock, and Christian Mumenthaler, the Group CEO of Swiss Re.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today. However, I couldn't miss the opportunity to honor my friend and colleague, Phillipe Donnet, one of this year's recipients of the prestigious Foreign Policy Association Corporate Social Responsibility Award. And so I wanted to extend my congratulations to Phillipe, a civic-minded leader who exemplifies responsible internationalism. Philippe's leadership of the Generali Group embodies the spirit of this award in every way. As CEO of Generali, one of the largest global insurance and asset manager providers, he has led the group's successful efforts in embedding responsible practices into all facets of the business, and as a result, has elevated the conversation around what it means to be a good corporate citizen. In 2021, Phillipe reinvigorated the group's business strategy, bringing the company's twin goals of both profit and purpose even closer. And in 2017, he launched the Human Safety Net, Generali's global program to support vulnerable families and integrate refugees into the business world through entrepreneurial projects. I want to thank Noel Latif and the Foreign Policy Association for continuing to invest in leaders like Phillipe. As economies and societies recalibrate after a few challenging years, your mission to enhance global cooperation is more relevant than ever before. And as we look to the future, we need more business leaders who seek to deliver beyond profit and make a real difference in the world. Phillipe, congratulations, a big hug, and really enjoy this evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests of the Foreign Policy Association, cher Phillipe. Let me begin by saying that I'm sorry I can't join you personally. Therefore, this video. It is a great honor to introduce today Phillipe Donnet, Group CEO of Generali, as one of the recipients of the FPA's Distinguished Corporate Social Responsibility Awards. I'm very glad to see that the FPA rewards another representative of the financial service industry for his efforts and his commitment, and also a fellow European, demonstrating so well that the FPA is truly committed to its mission of reaching out internationally. Last year, in my thank you note, I explained the roots and activities of Swiss Re, the company where I'm the CEO. I talked about our international presence and our business is global at its core, and that we as a business, but also as a society, are faced with problems today like climate change that can only be successfully addressed through joint efforts and collaboration. Like Swiss Re, Generali is a very global company, active in 50 countries and with 67 million customers. That's the population of Britain. Relations between Swiss Re and Generali are very old. In fact, one can say that the foundation of Swiss Re was inspired by a former Generali executive. Our second CEO came straight from Generali and stayed for a solid 14 years. And our first business contract was signed in 1866, 3 years after Swiss Re's foundation. Phillipe is a well-known personality in the insurance industry, but I only met him for the first time in 2016, when he became CEO of Generali. We share a number of things. We both underwent scientific technical education. We both spent most of our careers with the insurance industry. We both came from a French-speaking background. And now we also have a common that we both have been honored by the FPA. Phillipe studied in the famous École Polytechnique in Paris, one of the grandes écoles founded during the French Revolution. He graduated as an engineer. Later on, he also finished a degree at the Institut des Actuaires, the French actuary educational establishment. Phillipe joined AXA, another global insurance company with roots in France, and he took the career ladder step by step. It brought him to Asia as AXA's regional CEO. Once in Singapore, he changed trade and became an investment banker for a while. In 2013, he went back to his roots and joined Generali. As already mentioned, he then became the CEO 3 years later. What makes Phillipe stand out for me is that in a time when everybody wants to constantly send messages, he's a very good listener. Quiet, attentive, perceptive. He's a generally caring human being. Sustainability is very important to him, and in Venice, his city of residence, he and his wonderful wife are deeply engaged in a private capacity to preserve the beauty of the city for the long term. I heard stories that Phillipe used to be a rugby player in the past. This certainly was a uniquely useful training for a CEO of a publicly traded company, but even more so in his specific case. Over the years, he has demonstrated great strength and resilience with decidedly moving Generali into a successful position. I think I'll leave it with that. Phillipe, it is great to see that you can join this circle of distinguished FPA awardees. And I think it is well deserved, knowing your commitment, your drive, your ambition, and your empathy. I wish everybody a great reception and a great dinner. Thank you very much.
And once again, we'll invite Henry along with Phillipe to the stage.
I've never been next to a rugby player, so I think it's an honor to do that now. More than this honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening, everyone. Buonasera a tutti. I'm so happy to be together with all of you tonight here in New York. I'm coming a long way from a very old city, Venice, to receive this award. When the United States were founded in 1776 as a republic, the only other existing republic on the earth was the Republic of Venice. So, because once upon a time, Venice was not a city, it was a republic. So, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to the Foreign Policy Association. Thank you to its chairman, Fernandez, and its president, Latif, for this wonderful honor. I need to tell you right now at the beginning of my speech that there will be no joke. I know that there is a tradition in the United States to make a joke when you make a speech. I decided not to do it, and this is a risk management decision. Because if I make a joke, I'm not sure it will be a good one. It can be a bad one. And if I make a good one, probably another speaker might make a better joke. So at the end, you would forget my joke in the next few hours. If, on the other hand, I make a very bad joke, you will remember it forever. and speaking right after Jean Charest, I think I made the right decision not to make a joke. Generali has been working very hard to embed corporate social responsibility into everything we do. However, this is still not enough. We all need to work together as a single force, striving to leave the world in a better place. As leaders, we need to understand that sustainability is a journey. It's a journey that never ends. Generali is present in 50 countries worldwide. So we want this journey to be part of our global reach. Companies like our company must be able to change and challenge their own business model if they want to act sustainably. Investors are expecting it. They are not only expecting it, they are pushing hard for it. Regulators are accelerating. Employees see it as a priority, and customers are also asking for it. And the list goes on. So ESG practices are even changing how we design our product offering. At Generali, our sustainable business transformation is constantly evolving. It's evolving every day, and we keep accelerating on this. As a financial institution, and especially as an insurer and an investor, we have many levers to make a significant impact. What clients and activities we choose to insure or not to insure, how we select and engage with the companies we invest in, how we develop our people's potential, which socially minded organization we decide to support, and how, at the end, we embrace corporate transparency with our shareholders and all stakeholders. Our ambition is that sustainability will shape the way all decisions are made. Our ongoing commitment to sustainability is based on a proven track record, and I'm just going to give you a few examples. In 2017, Generali launched the Human Safety Net. It's a foundation whose mission is to unlock the potential of people living in vulnerable circumstances so that they can transform their lives, the lives of their families and of their communities. And since the launch of this foundation, we have assisted over 260,000 families, children, and refugees in 24 countries across the globe. In 2018, the board of directors approved the group strategy on climate change, setting very ambitious goals to promote a fair and just and socially just transition to a net zero emission economy. In 2019, we were the first European insurer to issue a green bond, and in 2021, we were the first European insurer to issue a sustainability bond. Also, in 2021, we established sustainability as the originator of our new strategic plan. And as part of it, we committed to making 9 billion euro in new green and sustainable bond investments between 2021 and 2025. Last year, we inaugurated in the heart of Venice on Piazza San Marco, our historic Procuratie Vecchie building, opened to the public for the first time in 500 years after the completion of a 6 years renovation project led by the architect Sir David Chipperfield, who just a couple of days ago received the 2023 Pritzker Prize. It's now the home of our Human Safety Net. It's a hub for social innovation, and tonight we are happy to give you all a book illustrating this beautiful and iconic landmark, and I'm happy to invite all of you to visit this building when you will come to Venice. Partnerships and cooperations are essential to tackle all the key issues of our time. Think about the impact that financial institutions can have by coming all together. One of our focus areas in Generali is the climate change, and we are one of the 8 founding members of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance that I had the honor of launching during the G20 in Venice 2 years ago. We are also a member of the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. Private and public institutions must work together as well. As a concrete example, last year, Generali signed a 3-year partnership with the United Nations Development Programme, the first of its kind, to leverage insurance as a key tool for sustainable development. And I'm pleased tonight to acknowledge the presence of the UNDP administrator, Mr. Achim Steiner, who has joined us tonight. So thank you for being there. Talking about the relationship between Europe and the United States, I think that the Inflation Reduction Act signals a very strong political will for the US to truly and finally embrace a transition towards net zero and invest in clean technologies. Looking ahead, I think that the European Union and the US need to cooperate much more, because if we want to make the world more sustainable, we need to replace competition with cooperation. This America committed to sustainability is the one the world needs. Some time ago, America invented the idea of inclusive capitalism with the so-called American dream. Everyone could come to the United States of America, work hard, and make his or her dream a reality. This should be true everywhere in the world, but with all of us having now less material and more spiritual aspirations. No one can achieve sustainability alone. These are objectives and goals that we must reach all together. This is not only about money and the bottom line anymore. It's about our corporate responsibility, which means making the best possible use of the wealth we are generating. I think back of the headquarters of our headquarters in Venice during the height of the COVID-19 lockdown. No tourists, no heavy transport, no traffic. The waters became blue again. The air was fresh and clear. The marine life returned to the lagoon. Life was back, and Venice was real again. It was a revival, it was a regeneration. And I have saved this image in the back of my mind. It remains my tangible, practical ambition on a worldwide scale. While I am honored and humbled by this award, I would like to share it, obviously, with our board of directors and with all the Generali people, as well as all our stakeholders. It has not been the efforts of one single individual, but the vision shared by our 82,000 colleagues and 161,000 agents all across the globe. And with a special mention to all women for their amazing vital energy. Because at the end of the day, sustainability is about life. It's about making life not only possible, but also good and happy for all and everywhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Phillipe. And one more round of applause, please, for all 3 of our honorees tonight. Before we adjourn for the evening, I'd like to say thank you to all of the FPA staff for putting this event together. Thank you for the hard work and everything that went into tonight. And thank you for being here tonight and supporting the Foreign Policy Association. Get home safe.